Vandal Hearts is a series of tactical role-playing games developed and published by Konami, except for the latest game released in 2010, Flames of Judgment, which was developed by Hijinx Studios. The first two games debuted on the original PlayStation in the 90s and were a decent alternative for those looking for something comparable to Final Fantasy Tactics. The only caveat is that it does require a bit of change to acquire a copy in today's market since they're not on PSN. However, Flames of Judgment can be found there for the PlayStation 3, though I'm not sure how good it is because I haven't gotten to it yet. Despite these games lacking the quality of life features games have today, like animation skips or a turbo function, they still hold up pretty well. Vandal Hearts 1 gave a standard experience that I would expect from a tactical RPG, but it wasn't until the second game that it delivered something truly remarkable. It introduced combat mechanics and progression systems that were different from anything I'd ever experienced before. Unlike most, if not all tactical games which had the player and AI take turns moving their units, Vandal Hearts 2 moves 2 units at once, one from the player and one from the AI. This kind of gameplay has the potential to cause some intriguing interactions to take place on the battlefield. Units can be moved out of harm's way by predicting which character will be attacked and countering the opponent's move. Of course, there were times when the enemy would move out of my attacks too when I incorrectly guessed the AI's play. There would also be instances where 2 units would move to the same space. When this occurs, the unit with the lowest weight, which is determined by their gear, will be pushed out and lose their turn. While this was something I wanted to take advantage of, gear has various weight limits that may or may not make this possible, so I had to keep this in mind when coming up with my strategies. At first, these kinds of interactions seemed weird and crazy. The system felt like it was too chaotic to work, but it became a defining feature I grew to appreciate as I improved my understanding of how the game mechanics functioned. It required me to approach combat in a completely different way from standard tactical games, and it added another layer of complexity that made the whole experience more interesting. I played the game in a more proactive way, forcing the AI to do specific things that I could abuse, which felt different from traditional tactical games like Fire Emblem, where my moves were more reactive to their moves. These different combat systems each have their own merits, but Vandal Hearts 2's mechanics will be forever ingrained in my brain for the uniqueness it brings to the genre. The progression system was also done in an interesting way, but shares some commonalities with systems of today. The class system has been removed, so there are technically no classes to advance through. However, roles like mages, clerics, or knights still exist and are determined by the equipment a character wears. Because of this, there are no restrictions to what a character can put on, which is a nice freedom to have. The additional thing to note is that each type of equipment does determine the resource pool available to the character. For instance, heavy armor will give the most health, but will not give the character much MP to use for spells. So while I could make a heavy armored mage, it wouldn't do me any good because they wouldn't be able to cast anything. This does put a soft limit on how customizable a character can actually be with their gear, but it's still nice to be able to change the roles on the fly to fit whatever needs arise instead of being shoehorned into one job for the entire game. The equipment system also had another unusual implementation where it couldn't give more stats than the maximum limit of the character, which is determined by their level. Each character has a max health, MP, and EP value that cannot be exceeded. If they equip items that have values higher than their max, then essentially those stats would be wasted. For instance, if a character has a max health of 338 and the total health given by their gear is 400, their health will still only be 338. At least until they level up some more. This was very unorthodox, but when it came down to it, the end result was not much different from how standard level up systems work. The most rewarding part of progression comes from the technique system. Various weapons come with an innate ability that cannot be used until it's unlocked. These skills are the way characters gain access to new attacks to use in combat. Each time a character performs an action, they will gain points to unlock the innate ability. In a game full of unorthodox mechanics, it shouldn't be a surprise that the technique system would also come with a catch. Characters don't actually learn the ability, but instead, it's attached to the equipment. So a character's skill will depend on the skills of the gear they're wearing. This is where the cool part comes in. These abilities can be transferred between equipment of the same type, allowing for very customizable builds to fit different situations. There are many different passive and active skills for each weapon class that make them feel unique. Swords can be outfitted with various on-hit passive abilities for a frontline assault, or staffs can have a mix of offensive and support spells. There are numerous options to pick from, and combined with the flexibility of giving whatever types of equipment I want to a character, I had a lot of control over shaping how they played. Vandal Hearts II does many things differently than a lot of games I've played. I was worried that it wouldn't be something I would like, but that worry was proven to be unfounded. Despite having to adjust to playing without the quality of life changes I'm so accustomed to, it was a great game that gave me many hours of enjoyment. The combat mechanics and progression systems really stood out, and will likely put Vandal Hearts 2 as the best Vandal Hearts game in my book. While it takes some time to adapt to the unconventional approaches to the various game mechanics, they were done really well to make gameplay more exciting and character progression more rewarding. If you haven't tried the Vandal Hearts series and are looking for a retro tactical RPG, I definitely recommend giving it a try if you can find yourself a copy.